to go down.
Planning Commission meeting to order at 7:05 PM. Apologize for the delay. If you'll join me in prayer and pledge. Lord, we are meeting today to conduct matters of business. Guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance today. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we will go to the approval of the agenda.
Move to approve.
First and a second, any discussion?
Yes, sir. Item number two, excuse me. Item number two has been asked to be removed at the request of the developer.
Sure. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Citizens' comments? Thank you. Make sure I'm reading from the right thing here. So we'll go into new business. Oh, sorry, approval of minutes from the May 2018 meeting.
Motion to approve.
First,
Second.
second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Now we'll move into new business. Item 1, conceptual plan, Redbud Springs subdivision, 12 proposed lots on 8.34 acres, property located at 500 Highway 96, tax map 22, parcel 134.07, R20 zoning district, property owned by Habitat for Humanity of Williamson County.
As the finance director for Habitat, I will recuse myself from this item.
Ma'am, thank you. Could just state your name for me, sir.
Daniel Reynolds.
Thank you, Daniel. And I do believe we have some staff comments. I'll get Mr. Jenkins to read them in for me there.
Yes, sir. Number one, TDOT approval will be required for the proposed new road connection to Highway 96. Number two, the proposed road alignment is not preferred. It is preferred that the proposed road be more linear in nature. Number three, all city street design and drainage design requirements will need to be met at the time more detailed plans are generated.
Thank you, sir. And I guess there is that one note. In discussion with the owner developer, these items will be addressed. Development plan, did you read that far?
Not yet,
Okay, there you go. No, it's good. You're good now. So you guys are aware of those three comments?
Yes, sir.
Any questions?
Since these lots are for Habitat for Humanity, are they already pre-sold and what we load from the back to the front, or are they still for sale?
They are not pre-sold and essentially not for sale. Typically don't even get to that stage until probably in the year that we're building the actual house.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When I was looking at this earlier, I was curious to know, there's a landscape buffer there on that south end of lot number 3 and lot number 2. Why is there a landscape buffer there and nowhere else? What's its purpose?
Initially, when I guess when we were going to rezone this property, I met with the neighbors on Fairfield Court and right there, Ruby's Grove, the neighbor in that, it's right there on Highway 96 to the right of lots 1 and 2. And one of the neighbor's concerns was seeing the house behind her property, or seeing houses behind her property. And so we added a landscape buffer to help kind of make her view from her back deck not be one of the rear of a house, but instead be one of, she likes seeing the trees in her backyard. So, you know, we'll keep it landscaped and nice, and, you know, we put a buffer there to give her that.
Okay. So you weren't required to, you just did it out of the kindness of your own heart, essentially, just to please her? That's good.
Essentially, yeah. You know, there was a good deal of feedback, I guess, from some of the neighbors when we went to rezone, so I wanted to accommodate them as the kind of new neighbor coming in.
Yeah, cool, man. Thank you.
Additional questions?
I guess a follow-up to that, since there are nobody else is speaking up. The common space on the west side there, what are you going to be using that common space for? It's awfully thin. Is it something that people are going to be able to actually use, or is it just so steep that it's just...
It's really steep. It probably won't, you know, maybe alongside the road, close to the road, will be, you know, somewhat usable. But as you start getting closer and closer to that property line, it gets steeper and steeper, rendering it, you know, not, you know, there won't be a playground there.
Any additional questions or discussion, or anyone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
First,
Second.
second. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you.
All right. Item 2 from new business was removed at the applicant's request, so we'll move into bonds and letters of credit. Item 3, the first item will be Heartland Reserve subdivision, Phase 1 through 3, request to reduce the bond. Currently, there's a performance bond in the amount of $137,500 to cover roads, sidewalks, storm drainage, and other improvements specified by the approved plans. Bond expires June 30th, 2018. I'll get Mr. Jenkins to read the staff comments for me, please, sir.
All improvements have been completed at this time. As-built drawings have been submitted and reviewed, but require additional information pertaining to storm structure elevations and drainage ditch topography before full subdivision acceptance is recommended by the staff. Engineer will provide a reduced new estimate based on his site inspection.
Sir? Mr. Owen?
Yeah, so your subdivision regulations set cap a minimum bond amount regardless of status of improvements. And that minimum amount is 15% of the original bond amount. So my recommendation would be to allow the bond to be renewed at 15% of the original bond amount. And I do not have that number on me, but we do have that number available to staff. We just have to look that up. That will be sufficient, certainly sufficient for, well, there's really not anything remaining other than getting the as-bills.
Mr. Owens, can I ask a question? That 15% of the original bond set, not the last bond set?
Correct. Correct. 15% of the original total bond amount that was set for each. I believe there's a single bond in place for all three of those phases. Kristen, does that sound right? So it would be that, whatever that aggregate total is for all three of those originally, 15% of that number.
But you do think it'll be lower than the current number, that 137.5?
I hope so. I'm pretty sure it will be.
All right, anyone like to make a motion?
If it's not, you can make a motion, whichever amount
The
is
lower
least.
amount.
Correct.
Go.
Renew at the current amount or 15% of the original amount, whichever is less.
Go.
Make a motion to renew at 15% of the original bonds for the aggregate of all three, or the current amount, whichever is less.
First,
I'll second that.
second, any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 4, Hartley Reserve Subdivision Phase 4, request to reduce the letter of credit amount. Currently, there is a letter of credit in the amount of $134,000 to cover roads, sidewalks, storm drainage, and other improvements specified by the approved plans. Letter of credit expires November 27, 2018. Mr. Jenkins, if you could read in those comments for me, please.
All improvements have been completed at this time. As-built drawings have been submitted and reviewed but require additional information pertaining to storm structure elevations and drainage ditch topography before full subdivision acceptance is recommended by staff. Engineer will provide a reduced new estimate based on a site inspection. An engineer will provide a new estimate based on his site inspection.
Mr. Engineer?
Same situation here. I'd recommend 15% of the original amount. I do know the original amount of this phase was around 610,000, so that 15% amount is going to be in the 91,000 range. But we'll get that calculated exact, but the 15% number is the one that we need.
Thank you, sir.
Make a motion to reduce to 15% of the original bond amount.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, Hickory Springs subdivision, request for subdivision acceptance and release of letter of credit. Currently, there is a letter of credit in the amount of $43,750 to cover sidewalks and drainage ditch improvements specified by the approved plans. Letter of credit expires September 18th, 2018. Staff comments, all improvements have been completed at this time, as-built drawings have been submitted and reviewed, and a site inspection has been performed. Staff recommends subdivision acceptance and release of the bond at this time. For clarification, does that go to the board next also to get approved for acceptance? Perfect. Anyone like to make a motion?
Make a motion, we accept.
First, Mr. Anderson.
Second.
Second, any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6, Fernville Springs Apartments, request to set the bond. Staff comments is the engineer will provide an amount based on the approved plans.
You saw these and approved these plans last month. I'll remind you that multifamily developments that have a single common ownership, so in this case apartments where there's a common owner of the entire land and he's just renting the individual units, is treated no differently than a commercial site from a bonding standpoint. So the bond that would be put in place for this particular development is a stabilization bond. So if the development was to begin construction and defaulted in any manners or left the site or abandoned the site, then the bond amount would be utilized to stabilize the site from a runoff standpoint, stormwater standpoint, no more, no less. And then the site would be left stabilized, and that would be the end of it. That is different, and just, again, just for educational purposes. That is different than a performance bond that you see in a subdivision development. In a subdivision development, we want a performance bond. The city wants a performance bond to cover the entire costs of all the improvements that are to be installed in the public right-of-way. So that if there was a default by the developer, that the city would have a bond in place that would guarantee the installation of all those improvements, even if the developer left. So with that, if there's not any questions on that, I would suggest a bond amount of $40,000 for this site.
Sir?
Motion to approve at $40,000 for a stabilization bond.
I'll second.
First and a second. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item 7, Fernville Springs condos, Phase 4, request to set the bond. Staff comments, engineer will provide an amount based on the approved plans.
So unlike the prior one where ownership was remained in a single entity of the entire property, this is a development where each individual unit will be owned by deed by different people. So there is interest that the city has in making sure that the proposed improvements that serve these individual condo units, access roads, utilities, stormwater, and all that, that they are actually installed according to the approved plans if the developer were to default. So with that said, I would recommend a performance bond amount of $751,000 or a reclamation bond amount of $239,000.
Thank you, sir. Any questions?
So, Mr. Owen, for clarification, reclamation bond of 239,000, or what was the first one?
The performance bond of $751,000,
Who makes that decision?
the developer.
Himself?
He can choose. And the way he chooses is if he desires to go ahead and have the final plat recorded, then we will require the performance bond of the full amount. If he chooses to have that plat recorded prior to installation of those improvements, then we want to guarantee that those improvements will fully be installed. If he desires to construct some of those improvements prior to final plat recording, which means he's installing and constructing before the plat's recorded, which means he can't sell any units, nobody can move in, there's no risk of a citizen moving into a unit and not having a completed street or water service or whatever. And so that's what the reclamation bond is. So he makes that decision based on how he wants to proceed with his construction.
Sir?
Make a motion that a performance bond be set at $751,000 or a reclamation bond of $259,000.
Sir? Move first.
Second.
Second. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, Ms. Hall?
$59.
239?
I thought it was 231.
wrote down 239.
Heard 259 the second time.
I may have said 39. What was it recorded as?
259?
Place at 751.
Should we go back in,
Yeah.
okay,
Motion to rescind the last bond for Fernville Springs condos.
I'll second the motion to rescind.
Do I need to vote on the rescind? Okay, so all in favor of rescinding that last vote on Farmville Springs bond amount?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So now, Commissioner Burks, if you could please
All right.
state your motion.
Make a motion to set the performance bond at $751,000 or a reclamation bond of $239,000.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a
Second.
First and a second, any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. All right, we will go into reports for discussion information. City planner? City engineer?
Yeah, real quick. Sorry. Since we didn't get to open space in the work session, I did want to bring this up. What I was going to suggest is the elimination of open space requirements for all traditional subdivision developments. That's a atypical requirement, and it generally results in what you saw before you tonight. This desire to just meet something on paper, a requirement on paper that doesn't really supply any benefit to a development as it pertains to usable open space. And so you end up with a road network, a proposed road network. And when we get to preliminary plat, my comments will probably be a little stronger on the road alignment that's being proposed. So I just wanted to use that as an example for why I would suggest removal of all open space requirements for traditional subdivisions. So if somebody just wants to go a straight R20 subdivision, like what you saw before you, then there wouldn't be any open space requirements. You've got minimum lot sizes of approximately half acre, which in most jurisdictions, that would be viewed as a decent-sized lot, that they could have a backyard that they can play in, put a dog in, have a basketball goal, whatever. Along with that, I think the open space requirements and plan developments are absolutely necessary, or would be suggested to keep. And I think we would need to strengthen the language on the type of improvements within that open space that you would deem suitable for the scale of project that is before you. So just wanted to throw that out there. I know we didn't get to it tonight. I will do my best to draft open space language for the PUD section that will be available at your next meeting. And if it's not anywhere near what you want, don't hesitate to table it. And what I don't want you to get from me is a feeling of being rushed for these zoning ordinance changes. So if you feel that, then we can discuss it more. But I also don't want you to say, all right, we're ready to move forward, and he's just sitting there. So I'm trying to balance those two options. So.
Thank you, sir. City attorney?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Manager, communication from the planning commission members? Ms. Slaughter?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Walls? Mr. Anderson? Mr. Powers? Mr. Burks?
Just thank you for catching that error on that last bond. I'm sure Mr. Mangrum appreciates that also.
Mr. Calley?
Nothing, thanks.
Mr. Jenkins?
No, sir.
I just real quick will be out of town for next month's meeting, so I pre-apologize for my absence. Mr. Jenkins will hold you guys down. And I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So move.